Hi, boys and girls. This is Ms. Kathy. I'm so happy you've joined me today for another story just for you. Chapter 3, The Disappearing Dog. Zack couldn't have just vanished, Dee Dee said, about to cry. She tried to act brave. Jenny knew how she felt because her cat had disappeared once, too. Jenny came over and put her arm around Dee Dee. Don't worry, Dee Dee. Zack will be all right. We'll find him. I know we'll find him, Chris said. Let's ask Jesus to help keep Zack safe and help us find him again. All the shoebox kids agreed, and they knelt down right there on the trail to pray. After they had finished praying, Dee Dee asked, Do you think someone kidnapped Zack? I don't see any other tracks, Sammy said. If someone had kidnapped him, I think there would be some tracks or something. Sammy's right, Willie agreed as he held Coco tightly. Dee Dee wasn't about to give up. She also wasn't sure if she believed no one had kidnapped Zack like Willie and Sammy had said. She knew they were just trying to make her feel better, but knowing Zack might have been kidnapped didn't make her feel better at all. She studied Zack's tracks again up to where they vanished. If Zack had gotten off the trail, he would have left tracks pointing in the direction he went. But the way Zack's tracks looked, it was as if he was running up the trail barking, and then he just disappeared. How could he have just disappeared? Dee Dee wondered out loud. Let's go back to the cabins, Chris suggested. Our parents are probably starting to worry. Plus, we better tell them what happened to Zack. Willie turned his wheelchair around. Maria glanced around one more time before she started back. Sammy stood up and followed Jenny, and Chris and Dee Dee brought up the rear. But before leaving, Dee Dee knelt down and studied the trail again where Zack's tracks had disappeared. It was then that she noticed something very peculiar. Beside Zack's footprints was a small, smooth dent in the ground in the general shape of an hourglass, only it was bigger on one end than on the other. That's odd, Dee Dee said out loud, but no one was around to hear her. Dee Dee slowly stood up. Then she ran after her friends to catch up. What was the odd-looking mark on the ground, she wondered. By the time the shoebox kids got back to the cabins, it was so dark all they could see among the trees were dark shadows. Willie let Coco jump to the ground, and Coco ran circles around his wheelchair. I don't like the woods at night very much, Chris muttered, looking around him as he slowed down to a trot. Neither do I, Jenny agreed. When the shoebox kids rounded the corner of the first cabin, they almost scared their parents to death. Where have you been? Mrs. Adams asked worriedly. We were ready to go search for all of you. Mom, Zack is lost, Dee Dee wailed. He just disappeared. Mr. and Mrs. Adams stared at each other for a second. They looked confused. Mr. Adams narrowed his eyebrows as he looked at Dee Dee. What do you mean, Zack is lost? We were hiking up the trail when Zack jerked his leash out of my hand and ran away. We could hear him barking as he ran up the trail. Then he suddenly stopped barking. When we went to look for him, we couldn't find him anywhere. We think he saw something in the forest, and that's why he took off barking, Willie added. Dee Dee nodded, but when we looked for Zack, Sammy found where his footprints just disappeared. Zack wasn't anywhere around, and we couldn't tell which way he went. Mr. Adams came up and put his arm around Dee Dee. It's all right, Dee Dee. You don't have to worry about Zack because he is right here. That's one reason we were so worried about you. When Zack showed up all alone, we thought something had happened to all of you. We were getting ready to launch a search party, and your mother wanted to call the police. As if to prove he was all right, Zack ran over and tried to jump into Dee Dee's arms. Oh, Zack, Dee Dee exclaimed. You're all right. I thought you were kidnapped. Kidnapped? Mrs. Adams asked. Where did you get the idea Zack had been kidnapped? Well, we thought since Zack suddenly disappeared, someone might have kidnapped him, Dee Dee tried to explain. Mr. Adams frowned. Are you sure you aren't all letting your imaginations run away with you? Zack came to our door a few minutes ago. He probably just chased a squirrel or some other small animal and lost you kids, so he came back here. Dee Dee knelt down and gave Zack a big hug. I wonder, she whispered so only Zack could hear, just what did happen to you?
The story you have heard today is a chapter of The Shoebox Kids, Book 10, Adventure on Wild Horse Mountain, written by Eric Stoffel, edited and created by Jerry D. Thomas, and used with permission from the Pacific Press Publishing Association. If you're interested in any other books published by the Seventh-day Adventist Church, please visit AdventistBookCenter.com or call 1-800-765-6955.
This podcast is a production of the Carolina Conference of the Seventh-day Adventist Church.